9. God the Son. As we turn to the doctrine of God the Son, it is important that our concept of knowledge remain the same. The goal of Hellenic thoughts in seeking knowledge was to understand the idea of things. But the idea of things is an abstraction, not a reality. We cannot know a man and a woman by abstraction, by seeking to know their idea or their flesh or matter in abstraction from them. We know them as persons. Even then, we cannot begin to know them unless we see them as creatures of the triune God, created for His purpose and glory. Because reality is not an abstraction, neither an idea nor a concourse of atoms, it cannot be truly known if we seek to understand it as an abstraction. This means that philosophers who seek to know God and His creation as an abstraction, or to know them exhaustively, are, quote, creating, end quote, an imaginary world. Knowledge, as sought by such philosophers and theologians, does not exist. Put crudely, it means that the idea of God is inseparable from the totality of the triune God. By denying that knowledge is pure reason, are we saying that it is experiential? On the contrary, while the aspects of reason and experience are clearly present and inseparable because man is a unity, we must affirm that knowledge is theological. As David makes clear, "For with thee is the fountain of life. In thy light shall we see light." Psalm 36, verse 9. Because God is the fountain of life, all knowledge begins with Him, and the knowledge of God is the starting point of all true knowledge. The ungodly can only know what they know by presupposing God, even as they deny Him, as Van Til made abundantly clear. Thus, we know God the Son as the triune God reveals Him. We are told that He is, even in His incarnation, truly God. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, Jeremiah chapter 23, verses 5 and 6, Joel chapter 2, verse 32, Romans chapter 9, verse 5, 1 John chapter 5, verse 20, 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16. John is very explicit, declaring of Jesus Christ, "This is the true God." John chapter 5, verse 20. He is eternally existent. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, John chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, Revelation chapter 1, verse 8. Jesus makes clear that He is the Son of God, Matthew chapter 26, verses 63 to 65, and that He is omnipresent, Matthew chapter 18, verse 20. This omnipresence means that Jesus Christ, as God the Son incarnate, was on earth, and yet at the very same time in heaven. John chapter 3, verse 13. He is omniscient, John chapter 2, verses 24 and 25, chapter 21, verse 17, Revelation chapter 2, verse 23. He is omnipotent, Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, Philippians chapter 3, verse 21, Revelation chapter 1, verse 8, and unchangeable, Hebrews chapter 1, verses 10 to 12, chapter 13, verse 8. The Son is active in the work of creation, John chapter 1, verses 3 and 10, Hebrews chapter 1, verses 2 and 10, Colossians chapter 1, verse 16, and in providence, Luke chapter 10, verse 22, John chapter 3, verse 35, chapter 17, verse 2, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 22, Colossians chapter 1, verse 17, Hebrews chapters 1 to 3. He has the power to forgive sins, Matthew chapter 5, verses 31 following, John chapter 5, verses 19 to 29, Acts chapter 10, verse 42, chapter 17, verse 31, Philippians chapter 3, verse 21, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, and together with this, the divine works of the resurrection of the dead and judgment. All power and authority in heaven and earth are in the Son's hands. Matthew chapter 28, verse 19. These and other texts makes clear that the Son is God, and that his sonship is not ethical, but metaphysical, from all eternity, and unique. He is the only begotten and the Son of God from before the Incarnation, John chapter 1, verse 14 and verse 18, Galatians chapter 4, verse 4. Berkhoff goes carefully into the biblical declarations of the personal subsistence, the eternal generation, and the deity of the Son. Any tampering with these doctrines leads quickly to heresy. Let us return again to the matter of knowledge. Jesus declares, "No man cometh unto the Father but by me." John chapter 14, verse 6. This is an unqualified statement. Whether we seek the Father by means of knowledge, for relief by prayer, or for salvation, Jesus Christ is the only way. If we seek knowledge apart from him, we deny both him and knowledge. The quest of the philosophers and theologians for a separate way is thus wrong. In answer to Philip's question and request that the Father be shown, deiknuo, show, exhibit, make known, prove, our Lord answers, "He that hath seen me hath seen the Father." But Philip, having been with Jesus for so long a time, had not really known him, and hence did not know the Father. John chapter 14, verse 8. To know the Son is to know the Father. The knowledge of the economy of the Trinity is inseparable from the ontology or being of the Trinity, and neither God's activities nor his being can be known in isolation from one another, nor other than in his self-revelation. Our life is a created unity. To be apart from and in war against God as a covenant breaker is to be under the bondage of sin and the sentence of death. We are then dead in sins and trespasses. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 1, compare chapter 2 verse 5, chapter 4 verse 18, etc. This is not only a theological but an epistemological fact. It governs our knowledge of God as well as our relationship to God. We cannot shift from Christianity to humanism as we go from theology to epistemology. We are plainly told, "He that hath the Son hath life, and he that hath not the Son of God hath not life." 1 John chapter 5, verse 12. It will be objected by some that life and death here have a, quote, spiritual, end quote, or theological meaning, and thus do not, quote, literally, end quote, mean life and death as we experience them. Such a statement rests on the humanistic premise that life must mean a this-worldly existence as a breathing entity, and death means endless non-existence. Neither definition is tenable for us. The idea of death as an endless non-existence is a myth. Death is separation from God and the denial of him and his law, word, and covenant, whether here or in hell. Life is faith, obedience, and fellowship in and with the triune God through the Son, both now and in the life everlasting. We cannot think otherwise without warping our view of things. Our view of things must be theological and God-centered. We cannot separate our knowledge of God's being from God's revelation and activity, but we cannot make the center of God's being coincide with his activity. The Son is the full incarnation and declaration of the Father, John chapter 1 verses 1 to 18, but he does not exhaust him. God the Son was himself at one and the same time on earth and yet in heaven, John chapter 3 verse 13. When our Lord identified himself as very God, the people sought to slay him because he declared, God was with his Father, making himself equal with God. John chapter 5, verses 17 and 18. Not only does our Lord retreat from that declaration, but he affirms it, at the same time declaring that all determination is from eternity, so that God's economy manifests his ontology. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he seeth the Father do. For what things soever he doeth, these also doeth the Son likewise. For the Father loveth the Son, and showeth him all things that himself doeth, and he will show him greater works than these, that ye may marvel. For as the Father raiseth up the dead, and quickeneth them, even so the Son quickeneth whom he will. For the Father judgeth no man, but hath committed all judgment unto the Son, that all men should honour the Son, even as they honour the Father. He that honoureth not the Son, honoureth not the Father which hath sent him. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that heareth my word, and believeth on him that sent me, hath everlasting life, and shall not come into condemnation, but is passed from death unto life. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and they that hear shall live. For as the Father hath life in himself, so hath he given to the Son to have life in himself, and hath given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man. John chapter 5, verses 19 to 27. In this remarkable declaration, our Lord first affirms the unity of God's being in eternity and his revelation on earth. The Father and the incarnate Son are in perfect accord, inseparably so. Second, determination is totally from eternity. The incarnate Son can do nothing of himself. God's revelation of himself in the Son is a full revelation, but God is not exhausted in his incarnation, creation, or revelation. The triune God and the three persons of the Godhead are in heaven, even as the Son was on earth. Third, God's love is fully on the incarnate Son, who is in the eternal counsel of God, who showeth him all things that himself doeth. Fourth, all power and authority is given to the Son to effect salvation, restoration, the resurrection, and the judgments. Fifth, as the Father hath life in himself, so hath he given to the Son to have life in himself, and hath given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man. The term now shifts to Son of Man, and the reference to life is to the possession of the power to regenerate men as the fountain of life, and to judge them as Lord. This is a declaration concerning the economy of God. Sixth, the Father judges no one in separation from the Son, but has committed all judgment to the Son, in order that all men may honour the Son, even as they honour the Father. The two are one in being, and are to be held one in honour. Seventh, the enemies of our Lord accused him of Sabbath breaking and of claiming to be God. His answer is to affirm himself as God the Son, and to deny any violation of God's law, because the Son can do nothing of himself. Verse 19. There can be no contradiction of wills between the Father and the Son. Again, we see the economy of God in unity with the being of God. Likewise, to honour the Son means to honour the Father, and to honour the Father requires honouring the Son. Thus, there is a perfect unity between God in his being, the eternal and sovereign God, and God in his activities and revelation. This unity is manifested in the Incarnation, and we can know the Father because we can know the Son. The Hellenic and humanistic view of knowledge and truth as an impersonal and abstract idea is a myth, and the attempts of philosophers and theologians to understand biblical faith in terms of abstractions is false and heretical. Because God is totally the creator, and there is no independent creation or counsel in the universe or beyond it, there is an inescapable unity of all things under God. Hence, life, faith, and knowledge are not in contradiction to one another where they are faithful to God and His Word. In John chapter 17, verse 3, we are told, "And this is life eternal, that they might know Thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom Thou hast sent." Compare John chapter 1, verse 4. Knowledge is not an abstract intellectual matter, but concerns the whole being of man. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 5 and 6, chapter 8, verse 6, chapter 11, verses 26 to 28, chapter 30, verses 18 to 20, Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 and 25, chapter 22, verse 37, Mark chapter 12, verse 30, Luke chapter 8, verses 47 and 48, chapter 10, verse 27, John chapter 7, verse 17, chapter 8, verses 31 and 32, chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, Romans chapter 1, verse 21, chapter 2, verses 19 to 21, chapter 10, verse 9 and 10, 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 to 3, chapter 13, verses 1 to 3, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 24, Hebrews chapter 6, verses 4 to 6, chapter 10, verses 38 and 39, Revelation chapter 22, verse 14. Knowledge is something which involves the total being of man. In knowledge, neither subject nor object are impersonal and abstract, because God the Creator, who is the ground of all knowledge as Creator, is neither impersonal nor abstract. In our theology, as in our lives, we cannot seek to know the Son of God as an idea. He is the living Lord,